If you are past 35 and you have less than $1,000 saved for a true emergency, this video is going to be uncomfortable. Good, sit with that for a second. Because here is the truth nobody wants to say out loud. At 25, a broken car or a missed paycheck was a headache. At 35, it can be the first domino in a chain that follows you for years. You have more people depending on you now. A mortgage, maybe kids, maybe aging parents starting to need help too. And somehow your safety net is still the same flimsy thing it was a decade ago. Everyone tells you to save for retirement. Nobody tells you that without an emergency fund, retirement savings gets raided the second life throws a punch. And life always throws a punch. In the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why an emergency fund becomes non-negotiable after 35. How much is actually enough, where to keep it, and the simple step-by-step plan to build it, even if your budget feels stretched to nothing right now. Stick with me until the end, because the last section is the part almost everyone skips, and it is the part that actually determines whether this plan works or quietly falls apart in month 3. And before you click away thinking this does not apply to you because you make decent money, let me stop you right there. This has almost nothing to do with income. I have talked to people earning 6 figures who are one missed paycheck from panic, and people earning half that who sleep just fine at night because they built the right system years ago. It is not about how much comes in. It is about whether any of it ever gets set aside on purpose before life finds a reason to spend it for you. So take a breath. This is not a lecture about how you have been doing everything wrong. It is a reset, a clear, honest look at one specific piece of your financial life that most people quietly avoid thinking about until the exact week they cannot avoid it anymore. One quick note before we dive in. I am not going to tell you to skip your morning coffee or cancel every small joy in your life to hit some arbitrary savings number by Friday. This is not about deprivation. It is about sequencing. Getting one specific piece of your financial foundation in place before everything else. Because without it, every other financial goal you have, paying off debt, investing, saving for a home, all of it sits on shakier ground than it needs to. Let's talk about what actually changes between 25 and 35, because it is not just your birthday candles. At 25, if you lost your job, you could move back in with your parents for a few months. Embarrassing, sure, but survivable. At 35, that option is usually gone. You are the one people move in with, not the other way around. Your obligations multiply quietly, almost without you noticing. A car payment turns into 2. A one-bedroom rental turns into a mortgage with an inspection report you still have nightmares about. And then there are the humans depending on you. A partner whose income you have quietly started planning around. Kids whose school fees do not care that the transmission just went out. Parents who raised you and are now starting to need you back. Here is the part that stings. Your margin for error actually shrinks at the exact moment your responsibilities grow. At 25, you had time on your side. Decades to recover from a bad year. At 35, a single bad year, one layoff, one medical scare, one flooded basement, can knock you off course for 5 years if you have nothing set aside. Think about David, 41, works in logistics outside Columbus. He always said he was responsible with money, paid his bills on time, never missed a credit card payment, but when his company did layoffs in March, he had 11 days of expenses saved. 11 days. Not because he was reckless, because nobody ever sat him down and said, at your stage of life, this number needs to be bigger. He is not lazy. He is not bad with money. He is exactly where most people are at 35, financially, getting by, looking fine from the outside, one emergency away from a real problem. That is the shift. It is not about being irresponsible. It is about the stakes changing while the safety net stayed the same size. There is another piece of this that rarely gets talked about, and it is the compounding weight of small, ongoing obligations that simply did not exist a decade earlier. A subscription for the kids' braces payment plan, a slightly higher insurance premium because you added a teenager to the policy, a parent's medication that somehow ended up on your card because their fixed income does not stretch as far as it used to. None of these show up as one dramatic expense. They show up as a slow tightening, month after month, until one day you look at your account and wonder where all the breathing room went. It did not disappear all at once. It got absorbed, quietly, a little at a time, by a life that got fuller, while your reserves stayed exactly where they were in your 20s. That is the real shift nobody puts on a birthday card. 35 is not a number. It is the point where the math of your life changed and your savings account never got the memo. There is also a timeline problem hiding inside all of this that deserves a moment of honesty. At 25, retirement is an abstraction, decades away, easy to postpone thinking about. At 35, the math starts getting real. You can see the outline of retirement now, even if it is still far off. And every dollar that gets pulled sideways into emergency debt repayment is a dollar that is not compounding toward that future anymore. This is the hidden cost of not having a cushion that almost nobody talks about. It is not just the interest you pay on the emergency itself. It is the retirement contribution you paused, or reduced, or skipped entirely for a few months while you dug out of an unplanned expense. Skip that contribution during your 30s, a period when compound growth has the most runway left to work its magic, and the actual cost, 20 or 30 years later, can dwarf the size of the original emergency by an enormous margin. That is the real reason this matters so much right now, at this stage of your life specifically, and not 5 or 10 years from now when the runway has gotten considerably shorter. Here is a sentence I want you to notice the next time it crosses your mind. I will start saving once I have some extra money left over. Sounds reasonable, feels responsible even. It is also, statistically, almost never true, because extra money is not a thing that appears. It is a thing you decide to create, on purpose, before everything else eats it first. Think about your own paycheck. The day it lands, what happens? Rent or mortgage? Groceries? The subscription you forgot you had? Something for the kids? Gas? And somehow, by the time you check your account 2 weeks later, there is no leftover pile just sitting there, waiting to be swept into savings. That is not a personal failing. That is how money behaves when it has no assignment. Every dollar without a job finds one. Usually the job it finds is whatever feels urgent in the moment, not whatever matters most in 5 years. So the person waiting for extra money is essentially waiting for their own spending habits to change on their own, without any structural shift. And spending habits almost never change on their own. They change when the money is removed from the equation, before you can touch it. Melissa, 39, a nurse in Denver, told me she had been saying I will start next month for actual years. Not months, years. Every January, new plan, same result. What finally worked was almost boring. She set up an automatic transfer of $40, not $400, the day her paycheck hit, moving straight into a separate account she could not see on her main banking app home screen. She told me, and I am going to say this the way she said it, because it stuck with me. I stopped waiting to feel ready. I just made it automatic and got out of my own way. That is the whole trick. You do not rise to the occasion of saving money. You fall to the level of your systems. Build the system first. The motivation, honestly, is optional after that. Think about it from a different angle for a second. Nobody waits for extra time to exercise. The people who actually stick with it block out a specific hour, on a specific day, whether they feel like it or not, and the feeling of wanting to go eventually catches up to the habit, not the other way around. Money works the same way. Waiting to feel like you have extra is waiting for a feeling that is designed, by the structure of modern spending, to never quite arrive. There will always be one more thing that seems to justify spending it first: a slightly nicer dinner out, an upgrade you did not strictly need but felt earned. None of these are moral failures. They are just what happens when money sits in an account with no assignment and no urgency attached to protecting it. The fix is not more willpower. The fix is removing the decision entirely, so that saving happens automatically, before your very reasonable, very human brain gets a vote in the matter. Let's get specific about what actually happens when life throws something at you, and there is no cushion underneath. This is not theoretical. This is Tuesday for millions of households. Your car needs a new transmission. $1,400, give or take. With savings, that is annoying. You write the check, you feel a small sting, you move on with your week. Without savings, that same repair goes on a credit card at 22% interest. Now it is not a $1,400 problem anymore. It is a $1,400 problem plus whatever interest accumulates while you slowly pay it down over the next 18 months. Same repair, wildly different financial outcome, based entirely on whether you had a buffer. Now scale that up. A trip to the emergency room. A furlough that stretches 3 weeks longer than expected. A roof that starts leaking the same month the water heater dies. Because apparently, disasters enjoy company. Each of these, on their own, is survivable with a cushion. Stacked together with no savings, they compound into something much bigger. Debt on top of debt. Minimum payments eating into next month's paycheck before it even arrives. And here is the quiet part that does not get said enough. This is exactly how otherwise financially responsible people end up carrying credit card balances they never intended to carry. It is rarely one reckless purchase. It is almost always an unplanned expense that had nowhere else to go. Tom, 46, a mechanic, ironically, told me his own transmission story. He fixes other people's cars for a living and still got caught without a buffer when his own truck broke down. He put it on a card because he had no other option in the moment. 8 months later, he was still paying it off, with interest, for a repair that should have cost him nothing extra at all. That gap between the repair cost and what he actually paid, that gap is the real cost of having no emergency fund. It is not a hypothetical. It has a dollar figure. And it grows every month you do not have a cushion in place. There is also a cost that never shows up on any statement, and it might be the most expensive part of all. The decisions people make under financial pressure tend to be worse decisions, not because they are careless, but because urgency narrows the options you even consider. You take the payday advance with the brutal fee, because the bill is due tomorrow, not next month. You skip the follow-up doctor's visit, because the copay feels impossible this particular week. And that skipped visit sometimes turns a small problem into a much bigger, much more expensive one down the road. You put off the small maintenance on the car because the big repair has not happened yet, which, ironically, is exactly how you end up with the big repair sooner than you would have otherwise. Every one of these choices, on its own, looks small and reasonable in the moment. Stacked together over a few years, they quietly cost far more than the emergency fund would have cost to build in the first place. That is the real price tag of going without one. It is not one number. It is a slow leak that never quite stops. And unlike a single dramatic financial disaster that people brace for, this slow leak is easy to miss entirely, because each individual decision felt small and reasonable at the time it was made. Let's also talk about the relationship cost, because money problems rarely stay contained to a single person's stress levels. When an unplanned expense lands hard on a household with no cushion, it does not just strain a bank account, it strains the people inside that household too. Arguments about money are consistently ranked among the top sources of tension between partners, and a huge share of those arguments do not start with reckless spending. They start with disagreement over how to handle a surprise bill neither person budgeted for, with blame quietly assigned in both directions, even when neither person actually did anything wrong. An emergency fund diffuses a shocking amount of that tension before it ever has the chance to start, simply by making sure the surprise expense has somewhere to go besides a heated conversation at the kitchen table at 11 at night. So how much do you actually need? I am not going to give you one magic number and pretend it applies to everyone, because that would be dishonest. What I can give you is a framework with 3 levels, and you can figure out where you land. Level 1 is the starter fund. This is thin, this is bare minimum, but it changes everything psychologically and practically. Somewhere around $1,000, sometimes stretched to $1,500 depending on your situation. This is not your full safety net. This is the number that stops a single car repair or a single vet bill from landing on a credit card. Level 2 is the intermediate fund, and this is where most people at your stage should be aiming first. This is 1 to 3 months of essential expenses, not your full lifestyle, your essential expenses. rent or mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, minimum debt payments. Add those up, multiply by 1 to 3, and that is your target range. Level 3 is the ideal fund, and for most people past 35 with a family, a mortgage, or a single-income household, this lands closer to 6 months of essential expenses. If your income is unpredictable, if you are self-employed, if you are the sole earner for your household, you may want to push toward the higher end of that range, or even beyond it. Here is the honest truth about these numbers. They are not about hitting a perfect figure and then feeling done forever. They are about buying yourself time. Time to think clearly instead of panicking. Time to job search properly instead of taking the first desperate offer. Time to fix the car without touching the mortgage payment. The exact number matters less than the direction you are moving. Someone with $800 saved is in a fundamentally different position than someone with zero, even though $800 is nowhere near 6 months of expenses. Progress compounds. Start with level 1, move to level 2. Build toward level 3 at your own pace, based on your own life, not someone else's spreadsheet. A quick word on how to actually calculate your essential expenses, because that phrase gets thrown around without much explanation. Pull up your last 2 or 3 months of bank statements and separate everything into 2 honest piles. Pile 1, the things that keep the lights on and everyone fed and housed. Rent or mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance premiums, minimum debt payments, transportation to get to work. Pile 2, everything else. Streaming subscriptions, dining out, the gym membership you use twice a month, the impulse purchases that seemed reasonable at the time. Your emergency fund target is built off pile 1 only, not pile 2. Because in a genuine emergency, pile 2 is exactly what gets cut first anyway. This exercise alone, just separating the 2 piles honestly, tends to be uncomfortable for most people the first time they do it. Because pile 2 is usually bigger than they expected. That discomfort is useful information, not something to feel bad about. Now, where should this money actually live? This part trips people up more than it should, so let's simplify it down to 2 criteria, and only 2. Liquidity and safety. Liquidity means you can get to the money quickly, within a day or 2, without penalties, without waiting periods, without jumping through hoops while your car sits at the mechanic. Safety means the value of the money is not at risk of dropping the week you need it most. This immediately rules out a few places people are tempted to put emergency savings. It should not be tied up in something that fluctuates in value day to day, because the exact week the market dips could be the exact week your furnace dies, and now you are selling at a loss just to cover a repair. It should not be locked into something with early withdrawal penalties or long waiting periods, because emergencies do not wait for maturity dates. And it should absolutely not live in the same account you use for everyday spending, mixed in with your grocery money and your coffee money. Because if it is visible and accessible on your main banking screen every single day, you will eventually convince yourself that one purchase is basically an emergency too. What you are looking for, without me naming specific products or institutions, is something separate from your everyday checking, easy to transfer from within a day or 2, and structured in a way that protects the principal rather than exposing it to market swings. Out of sight, but not out of reach. That balance is the entire goal. Not growth, not returns, just quiet, boring, reliable accessibility exactly when you need it and not a moment before. I know this is the section where people get tempted to overthink things, hunting for the one clever place to park this money that also earns them something extra. I understand the instinct, but resist it. The entire value of this fund comes from its boring predictability, not from squeezing out an extra percentage point somewhere. A friend of mine, and I will just call him Rob, because he would not want his last name in a video like this, spent an entire weekend once comparing different account options, chasing a slightly better rate, and in the process delayed actually opening anything for almost a month. A month where he had zero cushion, actively researching the perfect place to put a cushion that did not exist yet. Do not be Rob. Pick something simple that meets the 2 criteria, liquid and safe. Open it this week, and stop optimizing. You can always adjust later once the money is actually growing somewhere safe. You cannot adjust money that never got saved in the first place because you were still comparing spreadsheets. One more practical note on this. Consider splitting the fund conceptually, even if not physically, into two tiers once it grows past the starter level. A smaller, immediately accessible slice for the fast-moving emergencies, the car repair, the vet bill, the thing that needs handling within a day or two, and a slightly larger slice that can tolerate a day or two more of transfer time, reserved for the bigger scenarios, a job loss, a major medical event, something that unfolds over weeks rather than hours. This is not about complexity for its own sake. It is about making sure the money you need fastest is never even one extra step away from your hands when the moment actually arrives. Here is a mistake I see constantly, and it comes from a good place, which almost makes it worse. People take their emergency money and, wanting to be smart with it, put it somewhere it can grow. Sounds responsible on paper. In practice, it quietly destroys the entire purpose of an emergency fund. Emergency protection and wealth growth are two completely different jobs, and they should never share the same dollars. Your emergency fund's job is boring on purpose. Its entire performance metric is whether it is there, fully intact, the exact moment you need it, regardless of what the broader market is doing that week. Your investment money's job is the opposite. It is supposed to grow over decades, and it is allowed, expected even, to dip in value temporarily along the way, because you are not touching it for years or decades. The problem happens when those two jobs get blended into one account. Say your car needs an emergency repair the same week the market has a rough stretch. If your safety money is sitting in the same place as your growth money, you are now forced to sell at a loss just to cover something urgent. You have converted a temporary market dip into a permanent, locked-in loss, purely because the money was in the wrong place for the job it needed to do. Keep them separate. Not because investing is bad. Investing is great, for money that has years to recover from a bad stretch. But your emergency fund does not have years. It might need to perform tomorrow. Different job, different account, different rules entirely. I get why the instinct is there, honestly. Watching money just sit still, not growing, feels inefficient to anyone who has spent any time learning about investing. There is almost a guilt to it, like the money is being wasted by not working harder. Flip that thinking around. Your emergency fund is working. Its job is not growth. Its job is standing guard. A firefighter is not being lazy by sitting at the station when there is no fire. That is the job. Readiness. The moment you try to make your emergency fund do double duty as an investment, you have quietly changed its job description without updating what you actually need it to do. And that mismatch is exactly what leaves people exposed at the worst possible moment. Forced to sell investments at a loss during a downturn purely because they never built a separate, boring, sitting-still account for the emergencies that show up on their own unpredictable schedule. And one last distinction worth making clear. This does not mean you should never invest, or that investing is somehow reckless. It simply means sequencing matters. Build the emergency cushion first, even a modest starter version of it, and then direct additional money toward investing with a much clearer conscience, knowing that a bad week in the market will not force your hand into an emergency sale you never wanted to make. Let's talk about something that does not show up on any spreadsheet, but matters just as much as the dollar figure. What having this cushion actually does to your brain. There is a specific kind of background hum of anxiety that comes from knowing one bad week could unravel everything. It is quiet. It does not announce itself, but it shapes decisions in ways people rarely connect back to their bank balance. People without a cushion make worse decisions, not because they are worse decision makers, but because scarcity itself narrows your thinking. It pulls your focus onto the immediate crisis and away from the bigger picture. You take the first job offer instead of the right one because you cannot afford 3 more weeks of searching. You stay in a toxic workplace longer than you should because quitting without a buffer feels like free-falling. You avoid the dentist, you avoid the doctor. You avoid the conversation with your partner about money because every one of those conversations feels like it might crack something open you are not ready to deal with. Now flip it. Someone with even a modest cushion in place negotiates differently, applies for the role that actually excites them instead of the first one that will do, walks away from a bad deal, a bad landlord, a bad employer, because walking away does not mean catastrophe, it means inconvenience for a while. That shift, from survival thinking to strategic thinking, that is arguably the most valuable thing an emergency fund buys you. Not the dollars themselves, the mental space to make decisions from a place of choice instead of panic. Jennifer, 37, told me the biggest change after building her fund was not financial at all. She said she finally slept through the night again. That is not a small thing. That is the entire point. Think about how many decisions in your life over the past year were quietly shaped by a fear of running out of money before you ran out of month. The vacation you did not take because you could not fully relax anyway. The honest conversation with your boss about a raise you kept postponing because rocking the boat felt too risky when you had nothing to fall back on. The side project or business idea you shelved, not because it was a bad idea, but because you could not afford 3 months of reduced income while it got off the ground. An emergency fund does not directly hand you any of those outcomes. What it hands you is the option to actually consider them, seriously, instead of dismissing them instantly out of pure financial fear. That is a different kind of return on investment than any spreadsheet will show you, and for a lot of people, it ends up mattering more than almost any other number in their financial life. There is a physical component to this too, one that rarely gets connected to a bank balance, but absolutely should. Chronic financial anxiety shows up in the body. Tight shoulders you cannot quite explain. A stomach that stays slightly clenched through most of the day. Sleep that never feels fully restful, because some part of your brain is always running numbers in the background, even at 2 in the morning, even when you are supposedly relaxing on a Sunday. People rarely describe an emergency fund in physical terms, but ask anyone who has actually built one what changed. And alongside the financial answers, you will almost always hear something about simply feeling lighter, less braced, less like they are constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. That is not a coincidence, and it is not an exaggeration either. It is what happens when your nervous system finally gets the memo that the immediate threat has been handled. That physical shift, oddly enough, tends to ripple outward into other areas of life too. Better focus at work, more patience with your kids, more presence with your partner, all from one quiet account sitting in the background doing its job. Now let's connect a dot that most people never connect out loud. The direct line between having no emergency fund and ending up with credit card debt. It is almost never one irresponsible splurge that starts the cycle. Go back and look at most people's credit card statements honestly, and you will find the first big balance usually traces back to an unplanned expense. A car repair, a medical bill, a month with reduced hours at work. Something landed, there was no cushion to absorb it, so it went on plastic instead. And here is where it gets ugly. That first balance rarely gets paid off before the next unexpected expense shows up. So it stacks. Interest compounds on top of the original charge. The minimum payment creeps up. And now you are not just recovering from the original emergency, you are also servicing debt from it, every single month, on top of your regular expenses. This is the snowball, but not the good kind people talk about for paying debt off. This is the bad kind. It rolls downhill and picks up speed entirely because the very first domino, the lack of a cushion, was never addressed. An emergency fund is not just a savings tool, it is debt prevention. It interrupts the cycle at the exact point where it usually begins. The next time an unexpected expense lands, instead of reaching for a card, you reach for the account you already built specifically for this moment. No interest, no new debt, no spiral. Just the expense, handled, and life moves forward. That single interruption, repeated over years, is the difference between someone who slowly climbs out of debt and someone who never falls into it in the first place. I want to be clear about something here, because it matters. This is not about judging anyone currently carrying credit card debt as having done something wrong. Most debt spirals do not start with a reckless purchase people can point to and regret. They start with a genuinely unavoidable expense landing on a household with no buffer, and then simply never getting fully paid off before the next unavoidable expense arrives on its heels. If that describes where you are right now, the emergency fund is not a luxury you build after the debt is gone. In most cases, it should happen alongside paying down the debt, even if that feels counterintuitive. A small starter cushion, even just $500, sitting there while you pay down a card, prevents the next surprise expense from adding an entirely new balance on top of the one you are already working to eliminate. Without that small buffer, people can spend years running in place, paying down a balance only to add a fresh charge right back onto it the moment life throws something unexpected their way. Think about the math over a longer horizon too. A single unaddressed emergency, carried on a card at a typical interest rate, can end up costing 30 or 40% more than the original expense by the time it is fully paid off, depending on how long it lingers and what else gets added on top of it along the way. Multiply that by every unplanned expense over a 5 or 10-year stretch with no cushion in place, car repairs, medical bills, appliance failures, and the total quietly becomes a genuinely large number, one that would have covered a meaningful emergency fund several times over if it had gone towards savings instead of interest charges from the very beginning. Alright, let's build this thing from actual zero, step by step, because knowing you need a fund and knowing how to build one starting from nothing on a tight budget are two very different problems. Step 1. Open a separate account today, this week, before you do anything else on this list. Separate from your checking, somewhere you cannot see it every time you check your balance for groceries. This single move matters more than people expect, because visibility kills discipline. Step 2. Pick a starter number and make it absurdly small if you have to. Not $1,000 as your first move, $25, $50, whatever you will not talk yourself out of, transferring the day your paycheck lands. The goal of Step 2 is not the amount, it is proving to yourself the system works before you scale it up. Step 3. Automate it completely. Set the transfer to happen the same day your paycheck arrives, before you have a chance to spend that money on anything else. This removes willpower from the equation entirely, which matters, because willpower runs out by Thursday for most of us. Step 4. Find one category to trim, just one, not a full budget overhaul that you will abandon in 2 weeks out of sheer exhaustion. Maybe it is the subscriptions you forgot you had. Maybe it is eating out 3 fewer times a month. Redirect that exact amount straight into the fund. Step 5. Treat unexpected income as fund fuel, not spending money. Tax refund, work bonus, cash gift from a relative. Before that money touches your regular spending, move at least half of it, ideally more, straight into the emergency account. This is how people leapfrog months of slow progress in a single afternoon. Step 6. Set a milestone you can actually see. Not the full 6-month goal. That is too far away to feel real early on. The first milestone is level 1, that starter cushion, somewhere around $1,000. Celebrate hitting it. Actually acknowledge it. Then move the goalpost to level 2. Step 7. Once you hit your starter cushion, resist the urge to stop or to redirect that automatic transfer somewhere else immediately. Let the habit run for another month or 2 before you reassess. Habits need repetition to actually stick, not just a single successful attempt. Step 8. Revisit the number every few months. Not obsessively, just periodically. Especially after a raise, a new expense like a child or a larger mortgage, or a change in job stability. Your target should grow as your life grows, quietly, in the background, without becoming a source of stress. That is the entire plan. Nothing exotic. Nothing that requires a finance degree. Just a separate account, a small automatic transfer, one trimmed expense, and windfalls redirected on purpose instead of spent by accident. Let me walk you through what this actually looks like across a real month, because a list of steps can feel abstract until you see it applied. Say your paycheck lands on the 1st and the 15th. The moment the first paycheck lands, before you have opened a single shopping app, $50 moves automatically into the separate account you opened in Step 1. You do not see it happen. You do not have to remember to do it. It just happens. The same way your phone bill just happens. Halfway through the month, you notice you have not used that streaming service you kept meaning to cancel, so you cancel it, and redirect that $12 into the same account manually, just this once, as a small bonus deposit. At the end of the month, a rebate check for $18 shows up from a warranty claim you forgot you filed. Instead of letting it dissolve into your regular spending, you move it straight into the fund too. None of these numbers are dramatic on their own. $50, $12, $18, but add them up over 12 months, and you are looking at close to $1,000, built almost entirely on autopilot, without ever once sitting down and gritting your teeth through a painful, restrictive budget month. That is what the system is designed to feel like. Quiet, almost boring, which, honestly, is exactly how you want your finances to feel. One more thing worth naming directly. If $50 a paycheck genuinely is not possible right now, do not let that stop you from starting. $10 automated is infinitely more powerful than $100 you meant to transfer manually and never quite got around to. The amount can and should grow as your income grows, as debts get paid off, as expenses shift. What matters far more than the size of that first transfer is that it exists at all, running quietly in the background, proving to your future self that the system works before you ever have to think hard about it again. One final practical tip on execution. Automate the transfer for the day after payday, not the same day, if your paycheck timing is ever unpredictable. A single day of buffer protects you from an overdraft if a check clears late. And an overdraft fee is exactly the kind of unnecessary expense that undermines the entire goal of building a cushion in the first place. Small details like this are not glamorous, but they are the difference between a system that runs smoothly for years and one that quietly breaks the first time your paycheck lands a day later than expected. Let's talk about where this plan actually falls apart for most people, because it is rarely the plan itself that fails. It is a handful of predictable mistakes. Mistake 1. Giving up after a bad month. You automate the transfer, life happens, an actual emergency hits before the fund is fully built, and you have to dip into it early. That is not failure. That is literally what the fund is for. The mistake is treating that withdrawal as proof the system does not work and abandoning it entirely instead of simply rebuilding from wherever you land. A dented fund is still a working fund. It did its job. Rebuild it the same quiet way you built it the first time, one small automatic transfer at a time, without drama, without guilt, and without treating the setback as a verdict on your character or your discipline. Mistake 2. Using the fund for things that are not actually emergencies. A sale on something you wanted. A vacation that got a little more expensive than planned. A gift you feel obligated to buy. None of those are emergencies, no matter how urgent they feel in the moment. If you can see it coming on a calendar, it is not an emergency. It is an expense you should be planning for separately. The fund exists for the unplanned and the unavoidable, not the merely inconvenient. Mistake 3. Setting a target so large it feels pointless to even start. Staring at 6 months of expenses when you have $0 saved can feel so overwhelming that people freeze entirely and do nothing. This is exactly why the starter level exists. Start absurdly small. Momentum matters infinitely more than the size of your first deposit. Mistake 4. Comparing your progress to someone else's timeline. Your neighbor built their cushion in 4 months because they had no debt and a dual-income household. You might take 14 months because your situation is genuinely different, and that is fine. This is not a race against other people. It is a race against your own previous level of exposure to risk. Mistake 5. Forgetting to replenish the fund after using it. You use it exactly as intended, for a real emergency, and then life gets busy, and the automatic transfer never gets turned back on. Months later, you are right back where you started, exposed, without even realizing the safety net quietly disappeared. Treat replenishing the fund after a withdrawal as its own non-negotiable step, not an optional afterthought you will get to eventually. Put the automatic transfer back on the very same day you notice the balance dropped. Not next week, not once you feel ready, the very same day. Because that is exactly the kind of small, immediate action that keeps the whole system honest over the long run. Mistake 6. And this one is subtle. Treating every single unexpected expense as an equal emergency, when some of them genuinely deserve more thought before you drain the fund for them. Not every surprise bill needs the full balance withdrawn in a panic. Sometimes, the better move is a partial withdrawal, covering the urgent portion while you figure out a payment plan or a smaller solution for the rest. keeping some of your cushion intact for whatever comes next. Because emergencies, annoyingly, do not wait politely in line for the previous one to finish. Mistake 7. Letting perfect be the enemy of started. Waiting until you have the ideal account, the ideal interest rate, the ideal monthly amount figured out on paper before you begin. That planning phase can quietly eat months while you remain completely exposed the entire time. Open something imperfect today. Optimize it next month. An imperfect fund that exists beats a perfect plan that only lives in a notes app. Mistake 8. And this is the quiet one that catches even people who are doing everything else right. Building the fund and then never mentioning it to a partner or spouse, so that when the emergency actually hits, there is confusion, or worse, two people making withdrawal decisions independently without talking to each other first. If you share finances with someone, loop them in on where the fund lives, what counts as a real emergency in your shared definition, and how you both plan to rebuild it after a withdrawal. This single conversation, uncomfortable as it might feel to have, prevents an enormous amount of friction down the road, at exactly the moment when friction is the last thing either of you needs. Mistake 9, and it is a subtle one. Treating the fund as finished the moment it hits your first target number, and mentally checking the box forever. Life keeps changing. A new baby? A new mortgage? A job with less stability than the last one? Any of these should trigger a quiet recalculation of what enough actually looks like now, rather than assuming the number you calculated 2 years ago still applies to the life you are living today. So here is where this leaves you. An emergency fund is not about being paranoid. It is not about assuming the worst is coming. It is about making sure that when life does the thing life does, and it will, you get to respond instead of panic. You get to write a check instead of open a new credit card. You get to sleep instead of lying awake doing math at 2 in the morning. That shift, from bracing for impact to actually being ready for it, that is worth more than almost any other financial move you can make at this stage of your life. Not the flashiest, not the one that makes for exciting conversation at dinner, but arguably the one that protects everything else you are building: your retirement savings, your relationships, your ability to think clearly under pressure. Here is your actual homework tonight, not next week, not once things calm down, because things rarely calm down on their own schedule. Open that separate account. Set the transfer, even if it is small, even if it is embarrassingly small. Pick your starter number and commit to it for the next 30 days before you judge whether it is working. Tell me in the comments below which level you are starting from right now, level 1, level 2, or level 3, and what your biggest obstacle has been so far. Be honest about it. There is no wrong answer here, only useful information for where you actually stand today. I read every single comment, and I want to know where you actually stand, not where you wish you stood. If this video gave you a clearer picture of where to start, give it a like so it reaches more people at exactly your stage of life who need to hear this today. And subscribe if you want more honest, practical conversations about money and the habits that actually change it, not the theory, the actual behavior underneath it. You do not need a perfect plan today. You need one small automatic transfer and 30 days of letting it run. Start there. The rest builds itself from that one decision. Let me leave you with one last thought, because I think it matters more than any single number in this entire video. Every person we talked about today, David with his 11 days of savings, Melissa with her $40 automatic transfer, Tom paying off a truck repair for 8 months, Jennifer finally sleeping through the night, none of them are extraordinary. They are not finance experts. They did not have some secret advantage the rest of us are missing. They simply made one decision, at one point, to stop waiting for the perfect moment and start building something small and boring and reliable instead. That is available to you too, starting tonight, regardless of what your bank account looks like right now. Not someday, not once things settle down. Tonight, while it is fresh in your mind and before life finds something else for that money to do instead. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If even one part of this video changed how you think about that separate account, or nudged you toward opening it this week instead of next year, then it did exactly what it set out to do. I will see you in the next one, and until then, Take care of that cushion the same way it is quietly there to take care of you.